The cold silence of space was broken only by the drifting wreckage of shattered ships. Metal fragments floated like frozen ghosts, remnants of a battle that had ended hours ago. Fires flickered weakly in the remains of some vessels, their oxygen supplies slowly fading. Among the wreckage, scavengers moved like shadows, searching for anything of value. Koran, a warrior of the Jora, stood at the edge of his small scout vessel, scanning the debris field. His people were not part of the war that had just been fought. They did not take sides. They simply took what remained. In his culture, strength was proven not just in battle, but in what one could claim after it. The greatest warriors did not just destroy. They seized power, knowledge, and trophies. Koran was looking for something worthy. Weapons, technology, even data cores, anything that could be of use to his people. But the real prize, the one that would bring him honor, was something far rarer. A living human. The Jora had encountered humans before. They were unpredictable, quick-thinking creatures, weaker in strength but unmatched in adaptability. To capture one from a battlefield was seen as a great victory. They were not slaves, nor simple prisoners. A human taken after battle was a symbol, a living proof that the Jora warrior had outmatched their cunning. As Koran's ship glided through the wreckage, his scanners picked up something unusual. A human vessel, torn open by heavy fire, still had life signs, faint but present. His crew, 3 other Jora warriors, looked at him for orders. "Prepare the boarding tether," Koran commanded. The ship extended a mechanical arm, latching onto the human wreck. With a hiss, the airlock connected, and Koran stepped through into the ruined corridor. The inside of the human ship was a graveyard. Bodies floated, frozen or burned. Sparks crackled from exposed wires, and warning lights flashed weakly. The air was thin, barely breathable. Koran moved through the narrow halls, his heavy boots making dull thuds on the metal floor. His sharp eyes scanned for movement. There, just ahead, a flicker of motion. He approached carefully, stepping over debris. In a small, half-collapsed chamber, he found the survivor. A human male, young but not a soldier, lay slumped against the wall. His uniform was stained with blood, but he was breathing. His short, dark hair was matted with sweat, and his face was pale from blood loss and oxygen deprivation. His hands were calloused. An engineer, most likely. Not a warrior. Koran knelt beside him, studying him for a moment. The human's chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. His fingers twitched slightly, as if still trying to work on some unseen problem. Even near death, humans did not simply give up. A warrior would have died fighting. This one had survived through sheer stubbornness. Koran reached for his communicator. "I have found something," he said to his crew. "Prepare the medical chamber." One of his warriors hesitated. "A human. You wish to take him?" "He is still alive," Koran said simply. "He is mine now." Lifting the unconscious man over his shoulder, Koran carried his prize back to the ship. The human did not stir. His fate was now in the hands of his captor. The Jora vessel disengaged from the wreckage and vanished into the void, carrying with it a warrior's claim and an unexpected future. Noah's head throbbed. His body felt heavy, his limbs weak. His mind floated between wakefulness and darkness, but a deep instinct kept him from slipping away completely. He was alive. That much he knew. Slowly, his senses returned. The air smelled strange, not metallic like his ship, but something cooler, sharper. The ground beneath him wasn't metal but smooth, stone-like material. His breathing was easier now, though every breath felt foreign, as if the oxygen was mixed with something unfamiliar. His eyes flickered open. The ceiling above him was dark gray, covered in alien symbols. Dim lights cast a soft blue glow across the room. He was lying on a hard, flat surface, not a bed but something more like a medical table. His fingers twitched as he tried to move, testing his strength. Pain flared in his ribs, making him wince. His uniform was torn, and his left arm was bandaged with something that felt rough but sturdy. Someone had treated his wounds. But who? Then he remembered. The battle. The explosion. His ship breaking apart. He had been trapped in the wreckage, barely conscious. And then, his heart pounded as the last memory returned. A shadowy figure, broad shoulders, deep, glowing eyes. He wasn't on his ship anymore. He had been taken. Noah pushed himself up, forcing his body to move despite the pain. His surroundings came into focus. The room was small and simple, made of the same dark gray material. The walls were smooth, curving slightly inward, giving the space a strange, enclosed feeling. There were no windows, only a single doorway. And standing in that doorway was his captor. The alien was tall, powerful, his body covered in armor-like plates that seemed to be part of his skin. His face was strong, his dark eyes sharp and focused. He wasn't human, but he wasn't a mindless beast either. Intelligence radiated from him, along with something else, something Noah couldn't quite name. They stared at each other in silence. Then the alien spoke. His voice was deep, his words slow but clear. "You are awake." Noah swallowed. His throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Where am I?" The alien tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question. "You are on my ship." Noah's mind raced. This was bad. He was alone, surrounded by an unknown species. He didn't know their customs, their rules. He had no idea what they wanted from him. He took a careful breath, keeping his voice steady. "Why am I here?" The alien stepped closer, his heavy footsteps echoing in the quiet room. "You were found in the wreckage. You are my claim." Noah frowned. "Your claim?" The alien nodded. "A warrior takes what is valuable. A living human is rare." Noah's stomach tightened. He didn't like the way that sounded. "So what happens now?" The alien studied him for a moment before answering. "You live." That answer didn't bring much comfort, but Noah kept his expression calm. Panicking wouldn't help. He needed information. He needed to understand who these beings were and what they expected from him. He looked down at his bandaged arm. "You treated my wounds." The alien crossed his arms. "You would have died otherwise." Noah hesitated. "Why save me if I'm just a claim?" The alien's expression remained unreadable. "A warrior does not waste something valuable." That word again, valuable. Noah wasn't sure what it meant in this context. Did they see him as some kind of trophy? A pet? A prisoner? He had no weapons, no way to fight back. But he still had his mind. If he could understand their ways, maybe he could find a way to survive. Noah shifted slightly, testing his strength. His body ached, but he could move. He glanced around the room again. There were no visible restraints, no chains or locked doors. That was a good sign. He looked back at the alien. "Do you have a name?" For the first time, the alien seemed slightly surprised. His eyes narrowed, as if measuring the question. "I am Corin." Noah nodded. "I'm Noah." Another moment of silence passed between them. Then, to Noah's surprise, Corin spoke again. "You are an engineer." Noah blinked. "How do you know?" Corin motioned toward his hands. "Your fingers. They are rough from tools, not weapons." Noah flexed his hands, realizing Corin was right. It was a small detail, but it meant the alien was observant. He wasn't just a brute warrior. He paid attention. That made him even more dangerous. Noah decided to test something. "If I am valuable, then I assume I have some freedom." Corin's expression didn't change. "You are not in chains." That wasn't a yes, but it also wasn't a no. Noah took a slow breath. "Then let me see your ship." Corin's brow furrowed. "Why?" Noah met his gaze. "Because if you took me, then you should know something about humans. We are not meant to sit still." Another long silence. Then, unexpectedly, Corin gave a small nod. "Very well." Come. He turned and stepped through the doorway. Noah hesitated for only a second before following. He still didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: he wasn't going to be just a passive prisoner. If he was a claim, then he would make sure he was one they would never forget. Noah followed Corin through the dimly lit corridor, his senses alert. Every step felt heavy, not just because of his injuries, but because of the unknown. He was walking through an alien ship, surrounded by beings who saw him as a claim. He had no weapons, no allies, only his mind. The ship's interior was unlike anything he had seen before. The walls were smooth and dark, almost like stone, but when Corin passed a certain spot, the surface shifted, revealing hidden doors and pathways. The technology here was advanced, but in a different way from human ships. Less mechanical, more organic, like the vessel was alive in its own way. Noah kept his expression neutral, but inside, his curiosity burned. He needed to understand this ship. If he could learn how it worked, he could find a way to survive, maybe even escape. Corin led him to a larger chamber where 3 other Zora warriors stood. They turned as he entered, their dark eyes focused on him with quiet intensity. Their bodies were just as strong as Corin's, their armor-like skin gleaming under the blue lights. One of them, slightly taller than Corin, spoke first. "You let the human walk." His tone was firm, questioning. Corin gave a slight nod. "He wishes to see the ship." The warrior narrowed his eyes at Noah. "He is not one of us." Noah met the warrior's gaze. "I don't need to be one of you to understand a machine." A small silence followed. The Zora warriors exchanged glances. Noah could tell they weren't sure what to make of him. Most prisoners would be afraid, silent. But he wasn't acting like a prisoner. He was acting like someone with purpose. Finally, Corin gestured toward a large control panel at the center of the chamber. "If you understand machines, then tell me, what do you see?" Noah stepped forward, examining the control panel. The interface was unfamiliar, covered in strange symbols and glowing lines. But some things were universal. There were energy readings, power flow indicators, and navigation markers. This was the ship's central system. His fingers hovered over the surface. "This controls your ship's core functions," he said. "Power distribution, engine output, navigation." One of the warriors scoffed. "Obvious." Noah glanced at Corin. "What do you want to know?" Corin's expression was unreadable. "Tell me something we do not know." Noah took a slow breath and focused. He had no translator, no manual, just his mind. He studied the energy flow for a few seconds before noticing something, an inconsistency in the power readings. The energy wasn't flowing evenly through the ship. Some sections were drawing more than they should. "There's an imbalance in your power system," he said. "Energy is being wasted." One of the warriors frowned. "Impossible. Our systems are perfect." Noah pointed to a specific section of the panel. "Here, your engines are pulling extra power even when idle. That means energy is leaking somewhere." Corin stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he checked the readings. The other warriors leaned in, their earlier skepticism turning into cautious interest. "How do you see this?" Corin asked. Noah shrugged. "I build things. I repair things. When you spend enough time fixing broken machines, you learn how to see the problems others don't." Corin didn't respond immediately. Instead, he turned to one of the other warriors. "Confirm it." The warrior moved to another console, tapping in a command. A few moments later, he looked up, his expression unreadable. "He is correct." A ripple of tension passed through the room. The Zora did not like being wrong, and they definitely did not like that a human had seen a flaw before they did. Corin, however, remained still. His eyes stayed locked on Noah. Then, unexpectedly, he gave a short nod. "You are useful." Noah exhaled slowly. It wasn't a compliment, but it also wasn't an insult. It was an acknowledgement. One of the other warriors spoke, his voice cautious. "What do we do with him now?" Corin didn't answer immediately. He studied Noah for a long moment before finally speaking. He stays. The decision was made. The warriors did not question him further. Noah, however, understood what had just happened. He had proven himself, if only a little. He was no longer just a passive prize. He had shown them his worth. And if he played his cards right, that worth might just be the key to his survival. As the Jora turned back to their systems, Noah let his gaze drift around the room again. This was just the beginning. He had a long way to go, but one thing was certain: he was not done yet. And neither was Corin. Noah sat at the edge of the control room, watching the Jora warriors move around their ship's systems. He had expected them to ignore him after he pointed out the power imbalance, but instead they seemed more aware of his presence. They still didn't trust him, but they no longer looked at him as just a weak creature. Corin stood near one of the glowing panels, his dark eyes watching Noah closely. There was something calculating in his gaze, as if trying to understand what kind of being this human truly was. Noah knew he had gained a small amount of respect, but it wasn't enough. If he wanted to survive among these warriors, he had to prove himself again. Not just once, but over and over. One of the Jora warriors, the tallest among them, finally broke the silence. "The human saw something we did not," he admitted. "It does not mean he is one of us." Noah smirked slightly. "I don't need to be one of you to know how to fix things." Corin turned toward him. "You claim to understand machines," he said. "Tell me, human, do you also understand war?" Noah's smirk faded. He crossed his arms, thinking for a moment before answering. "I understand that war destroys. That's why I build instead." The Jora warriors exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. Among their kind, strength was everything. Battles, victories, and conquests defined their history. A species that preferred to build instead of fight was something they struggled to comprehend. Corin stepped closer, studying him. "You were on a warship when we found you," he said, "yet you say you are not a warrior." Noah sighed. "Not every human fights. Some of us fix the damage left behind." Corin tilted his head slightly. "And yet those who fix are often more dangerous than those who destroy." Noah frowned. "Why do you say that?" Corin's gaze darkened. "Because a warrior may break an enemy, but a builder, he can change the battlefield itself." Noah hadn't thought of it that way before, but Corin wasn't wrong. Engineers, scientists, and inventors had shaped wars in ways soldiers never could. The ability to create was a power of its own. Before he could respond, a sharp alarm rang through the ship. The Jora warriors immediately turned toward the control panel. The screen flashed with red warnings. One of the warriors growled, tapping the controls. "Navigation failure. One of the stabilizers is malfunctioning." Corin's expression hardened. "Where?" The warrior scanned the display. "Lower deck. Engineering section." Corin glanced at Noah. "If you are as useful as you claim, you will come with me." Noah hesitated for only a second before nodding. "All right." He followed Corin out of the control room, the other warriors watching silently as they left. The lower deck was darker, the air thick with the scent of overheated metal. Sparks flickered from one of the side panels, and a faint vibration ran through the floor, an indication of a system under strain. Corin led the way to a maintenance hatch. Inside, a large section of the ship's internal mechanisms pulsed with dim, flickering energy. Noah could see the problem immediately. A section of the stabilizer's power conduit had been damaged, likely due to debris from the battlefield. Energy was leaking out, disrupting the ship's balance. Corin crossed his arms. "Can you fix it?" Noah stepped forward, running his hands along the damaged area. "I can try," he said, "but I'll need tools." Corin handed him a small device. "This can fuse metal." Noah took it and knelt beside the conduit, carefully examining the damage. The material was different from what he was used to, but the principles were the same. The leak was causing an uneven power distribution, which in turn was affecting the ship's stabilizers. If he didn't repair it soon, the imbalance could get worse. He worked quickly, sealing the cracks and redirecting the energy flow. His hands moved with practiced precision, his mind focused only on the task. After a few minutes, the flickering energy steadied. The vibrations in the floor faded. He stood up, wiping sweat from his forehead. That should do it. Corin tapped a control panel on the wall. A moment later, a voice from the upper deck confirmed, stabilizer function restored. Corin turned back to Noah, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he gave a short nod. You did well. It was a simple statement, but coming from a Jora warrior, it meant something. Noah exhaled, feeling a small sense of relief. He wasn't just a prisoner anymore. He was proving his worth. As they made their way back to the upper deck, Noah couldn't help but glance at Corin. So, do I get paid for this work, or is saving your ship my reward? Corin actually gave a small, bemused huff. Your reward is that you still live. Noah chuckled. Fair enough. For the first time since he had woken up on this ship, he felt something close to hope. He wasn't just a claim anymore. He was something more. And maybe, just maybe, that was the start of something bigger. Noah sat cross-legged in the dimly lit maintenance bay, his hands busy repairing a damaged circuit board. The Jora ship had seen its share of battles, and now that he had proven himself useful, Corin had given him access to minor repairs. It wasn't freedom, but it was a step in the right direction. The hum of energy flowing through the ship was steady now, no longer disrupted by the stabilizer malfunction he had fixed earlier. He felt a sense of satisfaction. Machines made sense. They had problems, but they could be fixed. People, though. People were harder. A presence loomed near the entrance. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Corin, Noah said without stopping his work. Come to check if I'm actually useful or just watching me like a zoo animal. Corin's deep voice answered, calm and measured. You speak too much. Noah smirked. I get that a lot. He finished reconnecting the last wire and set the circuit board aside. Standing up, he stretched his sore muscles. The ship's gravity was slightly heavier than Earth's, and it was starting to wear on him. Corin observed him, his dark eyes unreadable. The others do not know what to make of you. Noah shrugged. That makes two of us. Corin crossed his arms. You think differently than us. You fix things, but you do not seek control. You do not challenge. Noah frowned. Why would I? I'm not trying to take over your ship. Corin studied him for a moment before speaking. Among my kind, to be useful is to be powerful. A warrior who proves himself strong rises in rank. A strategist who wins battles leads fleets. But you do not fight, yet you gain influence. Noah thought about that. Influence? He wasn't sure he had any, but maybe Corin saw it differently. The other warriors no longer dismissed him as just a weak human. They saw him as someone with skills. And skills, apparently, held value in their world. Corin stepped closer. You are not a warrior, yet you act without fear. Noah sighed. I'm plenty afraid. I just don't let it stop me. Corin considered this for a moment before nodding. That is a different kind of strength. Noah blinked, surprised by the words. Was that respect? Before he could respond, the ship's lights flickered. A low hum of power pulsed through the floor. Then a deep vibration followed. Something was wrong. Corin immediately turned toward the door. Come. Noah grabbed his tool belt and followed without hesitation. The control room was tense when they arrived. The other Jora warriors stood at the main display, their faces hard. One of them, the tallest warrior who had doubted Noah before, turned to Corin. We have a problem. The display showed a blinking red warning. Noah stepped closer and quickly understood why. A power drain was spreading through the ship's systems. It's not from inside, he muttered, scanning the data. Something is pulling energy from the ship. Corin's expression darkened. The leech drone. Noah frowned. A what? One of the warriors answered. A device used by scavengers. It latches onto ships and drains their energy to disable them. Then they come to take what remains. Noah's stomach tightened. He had heard of scavengers before, pirates who didn't fight with weapons but with technology. They disabled ships, stripped them for parts, and left nothing behind. How do you usually handle this? Noah asked. The warrior growled. We destroy the drone, but this one is hidden. It has buried itself into the ship's outer plating. Corin turned to Noah. You repaired our stabilizer. Can you stop this? Noah exhaled. No pressure, right? He scanned the system logs, searching for the drone's exact location. It was siphoning power near the engine's secondary conduit, a dangerous spot. If they just blasted it, they could damage their own ship. I have an idea, Noah said, but I need access to your engine control. The warriors hesitated. Engine control was one of the most guarded systems on any ship. Giving the human access, that was unheard of. Corin held Noah's gaze for a long moment. Then he turned to the others. Give him what he needs. The warriors didn't argue. They stepped aside, allowing Noah to take control. Noah's fingers moved quickly over the console. He adjusted the power flow, rerouting energy in a way that would confuse the leech drone. He wasn't just cutting it off, he was tricking it. If it thought the ship's energy had disappeared, it might detach itself, thinking it had drained everything. Seconds ticked by. The room was silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Then, a sharp beeping noise. The drone is detaching, one of the warriors confirmed. Noah didn't stop. He quickly reversed the energy flow, sending a controlled power surge back through the system. If the drone was still partially connected, a sudden explosion rocked the ship. Drone destroyed, the warrior announced. The warning signals disappeared from the screen. Power levels stabilized. Noah stepped back, exhaling in relief. Well, that worked. Corin watched him carefully. The other warriors exchanged glances. Finally, the tall warrior who had doubted Noah gave a slow nod. You may not be a warrior, he said, but you are not useless. Noah chuckled. I'll take that as a compliment. Corin said nothing for a long time. Then he turned to the others. The human stays. Noah felt the weight of those words. This wasn't just permission to remain on the ship. This was something more. He wasn't just a claim anymore. He was becoming part of something, and he wasn't sure how he felt about that. Noah sat near the main control deck, arms crossed as he watched the Jorah warriors discuss their next course of action. The ship's systems had stabilized after the leech drone attack, and for the first time since arriving, he felt like he wasn't just a prisoner. Corin stood at the center, listening to the reports from his crew. The other warriors had begun treating Noah with something close to respect, though they still kept their distance. It was a strange feeling. He wasn't one of them, but he wasn't entirely an outsider anymore. We are still vulnerable, one of the warriors said, tapping a display screen. The power surge weakened our defensive systems. If scavengers return, we will not last long. Corin's expression was unreadable. We need a safe place to make full repairs. Another warrior grunted. Our battle maps show no allied stations nearby. Corin turned toward Noah. Human, your kind travel these sectors. Where would you go if your ship needed repairs? Noah hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should be giving them information, but at this point, his survival was tied to theirs. If the ship was destroyed, he wouldn't have anywhere to go either. There's a neutral station about 2 jumps from here, he said. It's not controlled by humans or Jorah, just independent traders and engineers. One of the warriors frowned. A lawless station. Noah nodded. More like a station that only cares about business. As long as you pay, no one asks questions. The warriors exchanged glances. They didn't like the idea, but they also knew they had few choices. Corin's gaze stayed on Noah. You will guide us. Noah exhaled. Fine. But if we go there, we need a plan. If you walk in as warriors, people will assume you're here to fight. And trust me, this place does not like fights. Corin narrowed his eyes. Then what do you suggest? Noah smirked. We go in as something else. A few hours later, Noah stood at the edge of the ship's docking ramp, feeling the cool metal beneath his boots. The neutral station was massive, a floating city built from scavenged parts of old ships and forgotten technology. The air smelled of fuel, metal, and too many different species crammed into one place. Corin and two other Jorah warriors stood beside him. Instead of their usual armor-like uniforms, they had covered themselves in thick trader cloaks. The disguise wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. If anyone asks, "You're not warriors," Noah said as they walked. "You're just crew members looking for repairs." One of the warriors grumbled. "Deception is not our way." Noah chuckled. "Well, if you want to fight everyone here, be my guest. But I'd rather get out of this place alive." Corin remained silent, but Noah could tell he was watching everything. The warrior had never been in a place like this before, where strength wasn't the only power that mattered. As they moved deeper into the station, Noah led them to a repair dock run by an old engineer named Rillo. The man was human but had worked with dozens of alien species. If anyone could fix the Jorah ship without asking too many questions, it was him. Rillo looked up as they entered, his mechanical arm whirring softly. His gaze landed on Noah. "Didn't expect to see you with company like this." Noah smirked. "Long story. Can you take a look at our ship?" Rillo eyed the cloaked warriors. He wasn't stupid. He could tell they were more than just traders. But he didn't ask. He just gestured toward the back. "Show me what needs fixing." Noah nodded to Corin, and the Jorah warrior stepped forward. Together, they began explaining the damage. As Rillo worked, Noah noticed Corin watching everything carefully. The Jorah were a warrior race, but here, Corin was seeing something different. How problems were solved without fighting. How influence came from skill instead of strength. Noah leaned in slightly. "Different from what you're used to, huh?" Corin's expression didn't change. "You survive through knowledge instead of power." Noah shrugged. "Knowledge is power." Corin didn't answer, but something shifted in his gaze. Hours passed, and the repairs were nearly complete. Noah felt a sense of relief. Things were going smoothly. Too smoothly. That's when he heard the voices outside. A group of rough-looking scavengers had entered the repair dock, their eyes scanning the area. Their leader, a tall alien with metallic implants, stopped near the entrance. His gaze locked onto Noah. Well, the scavenger said. "Didn't expect to see a human with Jorah company." Noah tensed. He recognized this group. They were trouble. Corin stepped forward, his body shifting slightly, ready for a fight. Noah placed a hand on his arm. "Not here," he muttered. "This place doesn't allow fights." The scavenger smirked. "No need for a fight. Just a trade." He looked at Noah. "How about you come with us?" Corin's posture became rigid. "He is not yours to take." The scavenger raised an eyebrow. "Then what is he?" "A prisoner. A pet." His smirk widened. "Or maybe something more." Noah clenched his jaw. He knew what the scavenger was doing, trying to provoke Corin into a fight. If that happened, they'd be thrown off the station. Thinking fast, Noah stepped forward before Corin could react. He crossed his arms and gave the scavenger a bored look. "You really think I'd stick around with you instead of them?" He jerked a thumb toward Corin. "At least they actually know how to fly a ship." The scavenger's smirk faltered slightly. "Watch yourself, human." Noah just shrugged. Yeah. Now if you'll excuse us, we've got business to finish." The scavenger's eyes narrowed, but he didn't push further. Instead, he turned and left with his crew. Noah let out a slow breath. That was too close. Corin watched him carefully. "You avoided conflict with words instead of force." Noah smirked. "Told you. Knowledge is power." Corin said nothing, But there was something different in the way he looked at Noah now. It wasn't just respect. It was something deeper, understanding. As they walked back to the ship, Noah realized something. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that strength wasn't the only path. And Corin was starting to see it. Noah sat on the edge of a metal crate, watching as Rillo's repair drones finished their work on the Zora ship. The hum of machinery filled the dock, mixing with the distant voices of traders and engineers. The neutral station had been a tense stop, but things had gone smoother than expected. The scavengers had backed off, and Rillo had done his job without asking too many questions. The ship was ready. Corin stood nearby, silent as he observed the final repairs. The Zora warrior had been unusually quiet since their encounter with the scavengers. Noah wasn't sure what was going through his mind, but he could sense something had shifted. Finally, Corin turned to him. "You handled the scavengers well." Noah smirked. "You mean I stopped you from punching one of them?" Corin didn't deny it. "You prevented unnecessary conflict." Noah shrugged. "It's not always about fighting. Sometimes walking away is the smarter move." Corin studied him for a moment, then nodded slightly. It wasn't exactly agreement, but it was close enough. The other warriors approached, their cloaks now removed as they prepared to leave the station. The tall warrior who had doubted Noah at first gestured toward the ship. "Repairs are complete. We can depart." Corin looked at Noah. "Come." Noah hesitated. This was the moment. He had helped them, fixed their ship, and even saved them from scavengers. But what now? He could leave, stay on the station, try to find his own way back to human space, or he could go with them. Corin was watching him, waiting for his decision. Noah exhaled and stood. "All right, let's go." Back on the ship, the engines rumbled to life as they prepared to leave the station. Noah sat near the main control deck, watching as the starfield outside shifted. The station grew smaller as they moved into open space. Corin stood at the center of the room, his posture strong but relaxed. "You had a choice," he said finally, "yet you stayed." Noah leaned back in his chair. "Guess I got used to you guys." The other warriors glanced at each other, but none of them objected to his presence. That was a victory in itself. Corin nodded. "You are not Zora. You do not fight as we do. But you have proven yourself." Noah smirked. "So does that mean I finally get a bunk instead of the storage room?" Corin's lips twitched slightly, a rare hint of amusement. "We will see." The ship moved forward, deeper into the unknown. And for the first time, Noah wasn't just a prisoner. He was part of something more. A new path had begun.